elections in Victoria. Let's return to politics and bring in our panel, Bruce Hawker and Grahame Morris. Good to see you both. Thanks very much for joining us. The big news, of course, with the resumption of Parliament is Cori Bernardi. Let me start with you, Bruce. What do you think about the prospects of this new Conservative force that Cori Bernardi is expected to announce tomorrow as he breaks away finally from the Liberals?
Well, it makes things a little spicier on the right side of politics, that's for sure. It's going to be more complicated for elements within the Liberal Party, I think, particularly the right wing of the Liberal Party, to continue to assert itself in the way in which it has done before. We've seen Tony Abbott come out and plead with Bernardi not to leave the party because he needs him in the caucus room. However, I'm not sure that it's such a terrible thing for the Liberal Party per se, because Bernardi at the end of the day is going to be siding with the Conservatives on most issues and will probably have his party directing preferences to the Liberal Party in the event of an election. So I'm not sure that's so terrible for the Liberals, but not good for the right of the Liberal Party.
Interesting point. Grahame Morris, what about you? What do you think about the prospects of an Australian majority or whatever this new Conservative force is called?
Well, I hope overnight he thinks about this. Does he really want to be the Mal Colson of the Liberal Party? You know, you lose your political mates. He would be scratching around in South Australia for the sort of crumbs, because the Liberal and Labor Party will take a certain number. Senator Xenophon, Pauline Hanson, the Greens, and Cori would be scratching around for the sort of crumbs that would be a fraction of the National Party if the National Party really existed in South Australia. But Bruce is right to some extent. Look, the optics of this are terrible for the government, no doubt about that. But, you know, if he goes, then that sort of story about, you know, disunity within the Liberal Party because of Cori, that sort of gets diminished a little bit. But look, you know, I wonder what has happened between the election when all those Liberals worked their tail off to get Cori elected and now. No policy has changed. Nothing has changed. He just wants to set up this Cori party. And I'm just not quite sure. He'll just end up sort of wrecking the political mates that he now has.
It's an interesting point you make about not much has changed in a policy sense since he stood as a Liberal at the election 7 months ago. Not sure, Grahame, though, the Mal Colston comparison, well, I can understand the anger that'll be directed towards him. Colston, of course, quit the Labor Party. Well, the accusation was for the extra perks and dollars of becoming, what was it, Deputy Speaker or something?
Speaker.
Was it?
I think it was Speaker.
Deputy President or President of the Senate. For Cori Bernardi, this is a principal call, isn't it? He has more conservative social values, at least, than the rest of the party at the moment. Grahame? I'm just putting that to you, yeah. Is this a principle? Is this a principled position for Cori Bernardi? At the very least, you give him that he does genuinely have more conservative social values.
Well, than some, but he's no more socially conservative than me, or you know, 2/3 of the Liberal Party, and he's in his own interest. He should think about this. He's never really won a vote. That his pre-selections were all set up by former Senator Nick Minchin, and the South Australian Senate team, of which he's been part for a long time, has always had one of the worst results in the country. So, yeah, you know, I understand that there are a few columnists and a couple of people around the country who were saying, "Hey, Cori, you know, come and lead the Conservative Party," but it already exists, and it's called the Liberal Party, and he will be a sort of a rump scratching around for crumbs, and I just don't think in his own interest that's good for him.
But isn't that the problem? Isn't that really the problem, that the Liberal Party, if you talk to Malcolm Turnbull, is not really the old Liberal Party of Tony Abbott and John Howard? If you speak to others, they'd probably say, well, it's time to reassert the more conservative values in the Liberal Party, and that's where this tension exists.
What do you reckon they are? Because, as I pointed out to Eric Abetz earlier, Turnbull's doing what the Conservatives want on gay marriage, on 18C, on climate change, on the Republic. What is it?
What can he do? Yeah. I mean, I think this is the problem for them, because he really, or for him particularly, because he really is kowtowing to the Conservatives inside his own party, and yet he has this reputation for being a little bit untrustworthy because of his history, being a Republican, being basically supportive of gay marriage and socially progressive issues.
There's this constant suspicion.
There's this constant sort of unease, and you saw with people like Kevin Rudd too, with people inside the Labor Party who felt uneasy about him because he didn't necessarily represent everything that they saw as being important for the future of the Labor Party, and we saw where all that went, to hell in a handbasket. So I think he is kowtowing to the Conservatives, but my gut feeling is that it won't do him too much good in the longer run, because I think someone will come up and knock him over if his numbers keep going the way they are.
There's no doubt, Grahame, that Cori Bernardi really loves the Donald Trump impact in the United States. He markets himself, he wears the cap and so on. What is it, do you think, about Trump's policy agenda that Cori Bernardi really wants to echo here in Australia? Is it the immigration stuff? Is that what we're talking about here, that he wants a much tougher line on any sort of immigration, on Muslim immigration? I mean, is that the difference here?
Well, look, I understand that, but that's already Pauline Hanson. It's been taken, that ground. And all Cori's going to do is say, yeah, me too, to Pauline Hanson.
See, that's a really interesting point. I mean, how does he differentiate himself from Pauline Hanson?
Well, that's the point. And if he does walk tomorrow or the next day, what is it? What are these things that he wants to change? Like the gay vote, the plebiscite, he'd have to support that. All the defence stuff and whatnot in South Australia, he'd have to support. I can't think of a differentiating sort of policy that he's going to announce this tomorrow or the next day, if he did walk, and say, "Hey, look at me, I'm different." I'm maybe in a little bit of language, but
yeah,
really,
I'm sure. But is there something, Bruce? I mean, as a political strategist, is there an opening there to market yourself as this is what I believe that the rest of them have got wrong?
Yeah, it's very difficult to see. I mean, he's very strong on the anti-gay thing to the point of being almost repellent in some of his language. But I don't think that he's in any real way, any real sense, very different from Pauline Hanson. But we're seeing a further splintering of the Conservative side of politics. And the thing that's really saving them is compulsory preferential voting. Were it not for that, then they'd be in all sorts of trouble right now. I mean, arguably you could say the same about Labor and the Greens, but I think you'd be more likely to pick up those preferences in a non-compulsory preferential system. But for the big challenge is going to be to make sure that they can garner those preferences from those minor right-wing parties at the next election. If they can't do that,
that means doing a deal with One Nation.
That's doing a deal, and it's
well, just on that, Grahame, what do you think? I mean, a lot of Liberals are dancing around this.
Yeah, I agree. The strategy for the next election is all about those preferences.
So do a deal with One Nation, you'd suggest? You got to do it?
Yeah, I would. Yes, I would. We're more likely in the Senate to do a deal with Pauline Hanson and her team and Senator Xenophon than we are with the Labor Party on many of these big issues. And particularly in Queensland and whatnot, yes, I would. I would do a deal with Pauline Hanson, and I'd make it very, very clear that we are after her preferences. Because at the moment, if you look at the polling figures, even today, and thank goodness there's no election for a long time, but the primary vote of both major parties is terrible. So the whole point is to get the preferences back. We're just looking at it now on the screen. You're right. And from the coalition's point of view, the whole strategy is to make sure Bill Shorten stays there.
Grahame, just on these figures, I mean, 35% and 36% is not much better for Labor, but 35% for the coalition. I mean, how bad is that, and how much of a worry is this for the leadership of Malcolm Turnbull?
Well, you wouldn't want to get 3 months out from the election and still have those sort of polls, because they'd be catastrophic. But it is a long way off, and things change. We've seen, it's not all that long ago, everyone said Trump's a goose and can't win. Blow me down, he is.
Yeah.
And if you look at today, isn't it terrible to sort of where we're at, that you sort of can't trust the office of the President of the US, you can't trust, a senator that you've elected into the Senate, And nowadays, as of today, you definitely cannot trust organised religion. It's just terrible.
Well, that's part of that's part of the world we live in right now. I think that, though, having gone through those days in the 1990s with Pauline Hanson fighting for Labor in Queensland particularly, that the situation is quite different. Now, people have got more used to her. I think she's more acceptable, I'm sorry to say, than she was in 1998. I don't think all that many people who were voting Liberal in Queensland in 1998 who ended up voting Labor would do the same thing again. So I think...
Just on that, I mean, listening to you talk about her being more acceptable and so on, should Labor look at preference deals?
Well, I think that's a bridge too far for Labor because they've also got to do deals with the Greens. And that's going to be the big challenge for Labor, how they suppress her vote. And that comes down to, I think, a change in the way in which they approach their politics. I think, in a sense, they have to be a little bit more not Hanson-esque, but a bit more populist in the way in which they clothe themselves, be much more the outsiders rather than the insiders in politics if they're going to be a serious alternative. But I tell you this, in 1998, when we were not preferencing one nation, that was all fine in Queensland until we found someone from the National Party who was a former Nazi. And we had to make up our minds whether we're going to preference the Nazis or the One Nation beforehand. I think One Nation succeeded in that case.
Well, I should...
Campaigns throw those things up.
Grahame, just getting back to your interesting take on who can you trust these days. It seems you're arguing that Malcolm Turnbull really has had a lot of bad luck at the start of this year, whether it's, I guess, Susan Lee, Cori Bernardi, the Donald Trump phone call. Does he carry some blame, though, for his current polling and the current situation?
Oh, yeah, a bit of that in a communication sense. But look, every successful leader needs a bit of luck. John Howard had absolutely no luck in opposition, none. But he had a bit of luck in government. I don't think Malcolm Turnbull at the moment can take a trick, the poor bloke. You know, every time he tries to do the right thing, whether it's policy or by the country or anything else, something way out of his control, you know, like the health minister chuffing off to, the Gold Coast. You know, he can't take a trick, the poor bloke. I think if he had a little bit of luck, he'd be a very, very good leader. But at the moment, he needs that luck, and he needs the electorate to take another look at him and say, hey, compared to all the others, this bloke's actually pretty good.
Yeah, but you have to make your own luck in politics too. I mean, that's true what Grahame says. Luck does play a big role, but you do have to make your own luck. And I think some of his bad luck has been manufactured by other people, and he's a victim of that because in many ways he's a difficult fit in the Liberal Party.
Well, on that note, we'll have to wrap it up. Look forward to seeing where we're at next week, this time after the first week of Parliament. Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, good to talk to both of you. Thank you very much for that. We'll take a quick break and then the last word.